Well, hello again. This is Radio TV Phono Nut, revisiting something that we looked at, maybe several months, maybe even a year ago. This is circa 1939, 40, 41, somewhere along in there. Truetone AM radio in 78 RPM phonograph combination. Now, what makes this unit special is that it's a battery-operated model, and for the phonograph, it uses a spring-driven motor, which is wound up by this crank here. So, in other words, they incorporated a Victrola-style spring-wound motor in an electronic amplification. You don't see models like this too often, but these battery-operated sets were mainly used on farms and in other areas where the customer didn't have access to electricity, and many of these customers were in that situation until the 1950s or so. In the last video, we got the radio working relatively well, but I decided I wanted to pull this back out and try to get the phonograph working. First off, I had to do a little repair on the tone arm. Here's the actual bracket that the tone arm itself mounts to, and it was all loose and wouldn't stay in position. So I wrapped it with a couple of layers of electrical tape. Well, first, obviously, I took this screw out, took everything apart, wrapped this little piece with electrical tape, put it all back together, and it's nice and secure. The other problem it had was the old crystal cartridge was bad, which is no surprise. Now, I've long since thrown away the original cartridge, but this took one of those big, long, flat metal static pickup cartridges with a little thumb screw sticking out the front for needle replacement. In today's world, 99% of those types of cartridges are bad. They're no longer being made. Your only option is to send it off to West Tech Services and have it rebuilt for probably $50 or $60, if they're even still rebuilding cartridges. I was told that they were not, but I don't know. So instead of spending that kind of money, we installed a modern-day fan steel P51-3 that I obtained from the voiceofmusic.com. The cartridge cost about $15 plus shipping, so a figure of $20, which I find a lot more attractive than spending $50 or $60 on having an old crystal cartridge rebuilt. And this cartridge will actually give us better fidelity and track lighter. Now what we're going to have to do is worry about the counterbalance adjustment. Actually, with the old crystal cartridge, there was no type of counterbalance spring, and even taking the old heavy cartridge out and installing this cartridge still didn't get the tracking pressure down to what we needed it to be. This cartridge wants to see about 8 to 10 grams, although for 78 use they could track a little bit heavier. So what we're having to do is install a counterbalance spring, which is something that this tone arm didn't originally have. But thankfully they were nice enough to give us provisions for such a spring. Here's the hole here where one end of the spring will connect, and they gave us the little mounting stud where the other end of the spring connects to the tone arm. In order to keep the spring in place, I've applied a little bit of JB weld there, and once it fully sets, then we'll be good to go. We'll just reinstall the tone arm, connect our spring, check the tracking pressure with our digital gauge, and if it's still too heavy, then we'll have to remove a link or two on this spring to try to get it down a little bit. But at any rate, assuming I don't adjust anything with the spring being in place, it will still track lighter than it would previously. The platter runs, but as you can hear, it's a little bit noisy. So we probably want to take the mechanism apart and clean and lubricate it. And I'll admit I haven't had much experience with these spring-driven mechanisms. Pretty much everything I've worked on has been limited to AC-operated, electric motor-driven mechanisms. But, you know, it shouldn't be no big deal. I'm sure I can figure it out. And in order to remove the platter, you just simply unscrew the spindle and remove the washer that's under the spindle. And then the platter just lifts off. Man, I'm on a roll tonight, looks like. And in order to get the drive mechanism out, it looks like we first have to remove the crank, which is simple enough to do. And then we remove these screws here. And I suspect after that, the whole drive motor will drop out. Yeah, I might probably have to take this off. Here's the motor. As you can see, it's a little bit on the cruddy side, which is no surprise for something that's 75 plus years old. Don't know who made this. I'm sure that's the emblem that stands for whoever made it, but I don't know what that means. So really all I plan on doing to this is cleaning all the gunk and grime off, getting as much of the old lubricant out of the gears as I can, then I'll reapply some phono lube. Okay, well I just got my question answered. It's a General Industries mechanism. Very popular supplier of phonograph drive mechanisms all the way up into the 90s. Of course, by then they were all AC operated.
I love my life and protecting the environment.
Okay, here we are with the radio.
I do what I can.
It's plenty loud. Now, let's start the phonograph.
And then do it over again. What for the nail?
Well, as you can hear, it's playing, but it's a little bit tinny sounding, and I think I know why that is. Originally, this set had a 3-volt crystal cartridge. Well, you really don't need that because you're running the signal through this driver tube here, which preamplifies it and couples it to this final power tube. So what they did was they paralleled a resistor across the cartridge to pad down the output. Well, we're using a 0.5 volt cartridge, so you don't need the resistor. So I think what we'll do is clip that resistor out, and we should have a better tone once we do that. You remember we had to do something similar on that RCA Scholastic record player that we had a while back. And by the way, that hum you hear is from this battery eliminator that's not very well filtered. Okay, coming from the hot side of the phono jack, we have a series resistor, 100k ohm, that goes to the audio input point here, to the selector switch. And from the audio input point to switch, we have this 20k ohm resistor from there to ground. So I just clip that out of circuit, and we'll reconnect it and see if our performance improves. Oh, heavens, yes! Okay, we're all back together, and just to recap what I did, I know I didn't really show everything on camera. I replaced the pickup cartridge with a P51-3 for 78 RPM records. I installed a counterbalance spring off of a junk record player. We got the tracking down to about 13.5 grams, which for 78s is okay. Did a little light cleaning and lubricating of the drive mechanism. I didn't do a complete teardown because, like I mentioned, I really don't have a lot of experience with these spring-wound drives, and the last thing I want is to take it fully apart and end up breaking something or have something go haywire, so we'll just leave well enough alone. And right now we have the radio connected to a battery pack. I don't like the hum that's coming from that battery eliminator.
Here's Coburn, Vito Violante, Mike Lingard, Mitch Eby.
Canola Info is the National American Heart.
And
okay, it works. Let's try it on the record player now. I think our spring's about to run down.
Right under your eyes.
Wind this thing up a little more. Okay, now let's see.
Backyard.
There's our speed control. But it doesn't sound too bad.
Oh, you can go to the east, go to the west. One day you'll come, weary at heart. Back.
Honestly, I'm not going to be playing many records on this thing. This is more or less just to say that it works, so it's really no big deal. Okay, there you go, the late 30s, early 40s.
From cocaine.
Truetone battery-operated radio and 78 RPM phonograph. Thanks for watching, and more to come later.
Yet I get a kick out of you.